So, Bev, what got you into homesteading? Where did it all begin? Where did it start?
You found the camera. Ah, God. Oh, man. You know, when I was a kid in Toronto, I remember always wanting to grow stuff. I got a little kit with a petri dish and some kind of powdered gel that you mix with water, and you clear gel, and you would put a seed in it and then put the lid on the petri dish, and you got to watch the seed sprout a root and a leaf and all that stuff.
Cool.
And yeah, that's why. You know what? Dad found me growing stuff, grass and stuff, and
there's
things in my closet.
Not a lot of room in Toronto, right?
No, not at all. So I guess, you know, and I guess I was paying attention to stories. I remember one of the last times my mother went out socially was when we did the barn raising up at Aunt Jane's. And I was standing at the sink watching her use a wooden bowl and a paddle to wash butter.
Wow.
And I remember asking her what she was doing, and she said, well, I didn't see her churn the butter, but she said when you churn the butter, you have to wash the rest of the buttermilk out of it.
Wow.
And I said, how do you do that? She said, you wash it, but you have to use cold water because it's a fat.
Right, it will melt. Right?
And then she said, you just keep running the water over it and pushing the butter with the paddle until the milk comes out. And then when it's all water runs clear, she said, you put salt in it. And that was the first time I ever had raw butter.
Fresh churned butter.
Oh, good.
I bet it was delicious.
Because we had a corn roast at the time, you know. You know, put a barn up and
Yeah. So you basically you were always drawn to it.
Yeah.
You always loved it.
Always.
And did you always live in Toronto, or did you moved to? How old were you when you moved to the country?
To Apsley?
Yeah.
12. What Dad did is Dad sold the house.
Right.
I remember him asking me, how would you like to live in the country? I mean, I was always taking kids on nature walks.
And you were 12.
Stuff.
Who didn't want to live in the country when they were 12?
Yeah. Him and Uncle Jim were sitting in the, not your grandfather, the other Uncle Jim.
Right.
We're sitting in the kitchen, and Dad said to me, how would you like to live in the country? And you know what I did?
What?
I was 11 at the time. I burst into tears.
Really?
I burst into tears. I said, that's not funny. I had wanted it so bad. So when Dad sold the house, and while they were looking for property, I actually stayed with your grandparents.
Well, what made your dad want to move from Toronto all the way to Apsley?
Just because it was Toronto. Where we lived in Toronto, we lived in the Pape and Queen area, and if anybody knows anything about Toronto, that was becoming a fairly rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
We were like 2 blocks away from the waterfront. Dad had been trying to talk Mom into moving out of the city for years, but Mom refused because, well, that's the street she was raised on, and
And were my grandparents already in Peterborough on the hill?
Yep.
Okay.
They were already in Peterborough, and that's where I stayed while Dad was looking for property.
Okay.
He would come up on the weekend.
And where'd you stay when he built the house?
I stayed with your grandparents.
Wow.
When the house was being built.
But I was there when we were all little building the house.
Yeah.
So did they just come up on weekends or something?
They came up on weekends.
Okay.
And I finished my 6th grade in that school down by where the flashing light is, down
in Wakefield? Redpath?
No. In Peterborough. I walked down to the bottom of your grandparents' hill.
Yeah. And they caught
the bus.
You went to Redpath.
Right. But when we moved, when the shell was up, like June or whatever, when school was out, I went and stayed with Dad. But before we built the house, did you know that Dad asked my approval on the property? I'll never forget it. I felt so important. Your father, and my dad, and me all went to Apsley to look at the property, and we stopped at the Tuckers next door to ask about water quality and stuff, and they said, oh, it was wonderful, blah 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 blah. So Dad went, looked at the property, looked it all over, and we stood at the head of where the driveway was going to be, and Dad said, well, what do you think?
Right.
And I went, I love it. And he goes, good, we'll buy it.
Awesome.
You know?
Awesome.
Now, he had already made up his
Sure,
mind,
but he
made me a part of the process.
Sure, which is important.
And I'll never forget, my best friend, Geraldine, was living in that house that we'd stopped to ask about water.
Tuckers,
Yeah.
right?
And her and her friend were looking out the kitchen window. And back then, I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was wearing a baggy shirt, none of my button boobies were showing.
Right.
I had short hair. I was wearing one of my dad's work shirt and an old pair of jeans because we were looking at property.
Right.
And I had a bandana hanging out of my back pocket. And of course,
You fit right in.
Geraldine and her friend Brenda were in the kitchen looking out the window going, "Oh, is he ever cute?
Oh, no, they didn't.
Is he ever cute?
No, they didn't.
I hope he moves in next door." So anyway, when we finally moved there,
Oh, no.
I went to ask Geraldine if she wanted to come out and play, right? Geraldine already knew by
Right.
that point that I was
A girl. Right.
Right? But she forgot to tell her mother.
Right.
Okay, so B comes to the door, and I have forgotten Geraldine's name because Geraldine was not a common name.
Right.
I'd forgotten it, so when I got to the door, I knocked on it, and B came to the door. I said, "Can your daughter come out and play?" And she thought, I'll never forget her telling me, she thought, "What a bold little bugger, coming right to my door asking if my daughter could come out to play," right?
Aw.
And she went in the kitchen, I guess, and said something to Geraldine. Geraldine goes, "Mom, it's a girl!"
Oh, man. And so, did you guys have any animals when you lived in Apsley?
Just a dog.
Just a dog?
Yeah.
And how old
He
were
had
you?
2.5 acres, but Dad said the bylaws wouldn't let him have chickens because I begged
Yeah.
for chickens even then.
Yeah, those bylaws.
I made a garden that year, my first garden.
Oh, really? And but how old were you when you first started raising animals? Chickens, goats?
Oh God, 30.
Oh, wow.
Briar was a baby.
Okay.
You know, the first chicken I ever dispatched. I told you about that, didn't I?
No, which one?
We had laying hens.
Okay.
And I asked Aunt Jane how to, kill and clean a laying hen. I had bought 10 laying hens.
Okay.
And one laying hen wasn't laying. And I bought them 20 weeks old, which means they're already starting to lay.
Right.
I named all the chickens. But this one was named Gert. She was plump and pretty.
Right.
And she was the only one not laying eggs. She was never on the nest.
Okay.
So I said to her, "You got a week to lay an egg, or your dinner."
All right.
Right?
Right.
Of course, big words. Hey,
Sure.
I've never killed a chicken in my life.
Sure.
Right? So, anyway, this is back in our drinking days. So finally, I said to Howie, "Okay, it's Saturday. You've got to kill that chicken." And he goes, "What?" So he gets a 6-pack under his belt.
He's never killed a chicken before either.
No. He gets a 6-pack under his belt and takes the hatchet duller than a butter knife.
Oh.
Okay?
Oh.
Hack this poor bird's head off. Like people wonder why we get our reverence for the circle of life. Because, we did it all wrong the first time. And it just felt bad. It just, he brings it to me, and Arthur was fascinated. He was fascinated. He sat by me holding the bag while I plucked the chicken dry. You can do that. You can dry pluck a chicken.
But there's a better way.
I know. You can dry pluck it, and then you can just take a piece of newspaper and blowtorch like a lit piece of newspaper.
Okay.
And burn off the pin feathers. So anyway, I got all that done. And then I phoned Aunt Jane. Good old Aunt Jane. "Aunt Jane, how do I do this?" She said, "Well, you cut around the bum hole."
Okay.
And she said, "And you stick your hand in and you pull everything out."
Wow.
That's what I said. Okay. So I covered the table with newspaper. I got out my rubber cleaning gloves. I got out my sharpest knife. Had about 6 cigarettes and about 10 cups of tea and said, "Okay." Oh, and she said, "By the way, put it in cold water for a while first." She said,
Okay.
that way it's you're not sticking your hand in a warm,
Right.
a warm body cavity kind of thing.
Yummy.
Yeah, yummy. So
My
anyway,
appetite's growing.
so anyway, I get it all ready, and I, I get it all on the table, and I cut its woohoo around, and I stick my hand. She forgot to tell me to take the crop out. The crop is where they keep all their grain, so that they can swallow it and then chew it with their the grit. But if you don't take the crop out,
where's the crop?
The crop is right here
In the neck. Okay.
Yeah, and attached to that crop is the vocal cords.
Okay.
Okay. So, hang on a second.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, could I have 1 extra large orange pico tea, 1 tea bag, and 2 milk, please? S'il vous plaît?
Yes,
That's it.
yes, okay.
Thank you. So anyway,
So she forgot to tell you to take the
crop
out.
So I get all my guts up, right? Mm-hmm. And I stick my hand up this chicken's woohoo. Oh. And it went, oh!
No, it didn't.
Yes, it did.
Oh my God.
And
Oh my God, I'm gonna throw.
And I dropped it, and I grabbed the phone, and I ran outside, and I phoned Aunt Jane, and I was shaking so hard. I had a cigarette in my hand, and my gloves were covered in gawk, and I was like, Aunt Jane, what happened? Because part of your mind, when you hear a noise like that, is that it's still alive.
Right.
Even though there's no head and none of that stuff.
It's air.
And she said, oh honey, I forgot to tell you. Take out the crop and the vocal cords.
She did that on purpose, I'm sure.
I know she did. I know. I love you, Aunt Jane. God rest your soul. Bonjour. Yeah. So that was the first experience. I was sitting outside. I shook for a half an hour.
Oh.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
That was my first experience with delicious chicken.
Yeah.
Delicious chicken.
I've had your chicken. It is really good.
You're gonna have one of my turkeys this year.
Yes, I am. A turtle. Is it a boy?
I don't know. I don't know. I think they're all girls.
No.
I think they're odd, which would be fine with me. Girl turkeys are better breast meat. I thought that was a joke when my farmer landlord at that same place where I killed my first chicken,
Right.
he said, no, if you get meat birds, you want females. I said, why? And he goes, more breast meat. And I'm looking at him going,
sure.
No, it's true though.
I know, but you're thinking in your mind.
I'm looking at him going, you dirty old bugger,
sure.
you know?
But no. Sure.
Merci beaucoup, bonne journée. They
Here,
put
take that.
both tea bags in. It's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy because I spoke to her in English.
So that was your first chicken kill.
Yeah.
What about your first goat?
That was before the famous George.
And George was the big billy goat,
No,
right?
George was the little buck that that was Clover and Blossom's dad.
Okay.
And he's the one that caused all the troll issues. But before that, we bought a couple of Nubian bucks.
Okay.
And they had their nuts intact, but they weren't old enough to be tainted taste.
Okay.
So we got those the first time.
Well, did you get goats, pig, or cows first, or rabbit? But rabbit came later, right?
Yeah, we got first was the
Pig,
chickens, and
then
then the poultry was first.
Yeah.
Then it was goats.
Okay, and then pig.
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't get a pig until a couple of years later.
Okay.
Because we're still figuring this stuff out, eh?
Which one's your favorite to raise?
I love
goat?
my dairy goats.
I love your curried goat.
I
love your curried goats. Delicious.
Okay.
I don't eat.
And this is a person who doesn't eat meat, folks.
So
City buses.
no, I eat. I do eat bison on occasion. I eat.
You have to taste my venison, man. It's not the venison you remember.
No, I don't care. I've been told that a million times. I can't.
No,
stand
Dee Dee, trust me. I don't like venison.
Fine, I'll try it.
thank you.
I'll do it. Eat the bison, but it's store bought, but it's from a local bison guy out in where we live in the Wakefield area.
Yeah.
So, what's kept you homesteading? Just
We didn't start homesteading in earnest until we saw Food Inc.
Ah, okay.
So we decided that, well, I guess that was before that, but we watched Food Inc. and we realized that there had to be a better way.
Yeah.
There had to be a better way if you were going to eat meat and vegetables and all this stuff. We realized we had been being lied to about the food industry.
That's what took my husband off me, Kevin. Food Inc.
Yeah.
Is that one? Yeah, it's a good documentary.
Yeah.
So, then you guys decided that's where you bought you moved into the Wakefield area, you rented for a while, and then you found some property that you guys fell in love with, and you
paid half down.
Oh yeah, and that place was just a tiny little thing, and you and Howie have renovated. It looks wonderful. And
it was falling down.
Yeah. And you guys decided to did the bargain. Big garden.
It was actually, the chickens was my idea. Because before, when we lived in Colborne and we raised chickens and turkeys, we took them to a place to be dispatched and packaged.
Right. And
Howie said, I'm not going to do that if, A, we couldn't find a place to do it.
Right.
And B, he said, it's got to be cost effective. And it's not cost effective if you are, paying to have somebody else kill and clean your animals.
Sure.
So I said, okay, well, let's start out with 6 chickens, which was actually, 10. And let's start out with 6 chickens. And I will show, if there's any roosters, then I will do the butchering. And I'll show you. He said, if you can show me that you can do it,
right,
then we'll do it.
Okay.
He stood back at the porch. I didn't get it on film because I wasn't videoing then. And I made him take pictures.
Right.
Because, and he goes, well, I don't want to be a part of it. And I said, somebody's got to hold the camera. Right. So he stood back by the house and zoomed in and took pictures. And then that's when I realized I had done my research, and I put a stick across their neck and say a little prayer and pull their legs.
Right.
And I did the whole process right there. Okay. I killed it, cleaned it, wrapped it, everything. And he went, well, that wasn't so bad.
Right.
And I went, there you go. I said, guess what? We're getting chickens. So we're at Wally World, folks. We're going to go and do some chopping. Edie, thank you.
You're welcome.